sort of review this to see if there is a sort of way that some of this could be expedited. So if something was easy, we would say, we would still categorize this as either an EP vote or a community vote, but we would then schedule a call with the community to just sort of discuss and get feedback. And perhaps during this call, if the community feels like there's a potential for this, that it should go to a community, well, maybe that they can voice that, and we can sort of come to a sort of a decision on that front. But this is sort of the thought that we're going through right now, and that's sort of the first topic that maybe we can open the floor to, and then after that we can open up broadly to the grant discussion. So with that, I don't know if any of the other EPs want to add any color or respond to this, or we can just start inviting folks up who want to sort of talk with us about this, what's been presented here.
I think you did a good job summarizing. I think there's a lot of kind of items we discussed around different approaches to this. But I think we can open it up to anyone who has questions and take it from there. Maybe if anyone wants, we can also just provide some clarity around some kind of shortcomings of turning everything over to community vote, and how that's going to kind of, outside of the participation kind of cliff. What also is going to likely happen if you do have a participation cliff is you're going to find, if the community is voting on these types of things, you're probably not going to hit threshold. And if you don't hit threshold, or are you going to create a new rule to kind of manage that governance decision that lowers the threshold, and that therefore kind of makes a more gameable governance system, whereby people who are more engaged have the ability to kind of sway decision making. And so we've kind of gone through all these different attack vectors and from a governance standpoint and talked about them, but I'm sure the community has some interesting takes and probably has some questions about it, but I think we wanted to just make sure we turned it over.
Come on. No, I know somebody out there's got something.
We got one.
Someone raised their hand. Yeah.
Does anyone know how to?
I got him.
Let them up. Okay. Hey, name.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the call, and thank you for inviting me up to speak. So about this suggestion, I think, so this was something that I had originally suggested in October. I think that EPs should get a community check, a sentiment check from the community. I don't think, like, my initial suggestion was that I don't think that the community should vote on everything. I don't think that is what anybody really wants. But I do think that people want the community to have a say, in the sense that, if EPs would sentiment check the community, I think that would be better. If this approach manages to achieve that, I think I'm all for that. But so Meta said that initially there was some feedback from the community against, having to vote on every small thing. Given that there haven't been as many proposals, firstly, I would recommend, I would encourage that if such feedback is received, I think it should be noted somewhere in terms of how many people have said, how many people have been for something or against something. I think if it's one person or two people, that's different, and it's different if it's the community at large, however many people we think that is. But I don't think, if I recall correctly, I don't think there were a lot of people saying that we shouldn't vote on everything and why are we being asked to vote on every single thing. I don't think there were a lot of people. I think there were maybe three people at best. So I don't think that was feedback enough to do a complete opposite of that and have no sentiment check at all. I don't feel that way at all. So
yeah, I think maybe we over-indexed, right? We probably over-indexed on feedback just to be, listen and but yeah, I think that the the insertion of a gut check prior to the vote is probably healthy, just so we have like a barometer of how the community feels and maybe an opportunity to hear anything we may not have thought of. So I think that, yeah, hopefully that feels, Nate, it feels like to you that we've satisfied that requirement in the new model.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, I think Cole can attest to that. When in October I gave the suggestion, I literally just said that, maybe open something up to the community for like 3 days or 7 days, whatever, just for comments. You don't even have to agree to everything the community says, just to kind of sentiment check them, just to understand where they're coming from. So that if there is room for you to make any adjustments, that we can kind of make them before something is finalized. What I personally feel, and perhaps the community, if people feel that way, they can also contribute to this discussion, is that oftentimes when a final kind of, like a final report or a decision just lands, it just feels like it came out of nowhere, right? And then, I mean, I expect everybody, the EPs are kind of, like representatives for me and everybody else, right? So representatives have to have a pulse on what people are thinking and feeling, and how they feel about any change at all. People don't have to vote for every change, but the representatives should know exactly. I feel they should know that the community at large feels in favor of this or not in favor of this. And even if they have to do something that is not in line with what the community at large wants, I think they should be able to explain that to their, to the community, to just kind of take them into confidence. Hey, so we understand you feel this way, but here's what we're thinking. And I'm sure that, at the end of the day, I don't think anybody thinks that the EPs don't want the best for the project. And we obviously don't want we want the best for the project as well. I don't think that's something that anybody would argue. I think it's mostly about feeling represented, number one. And number two is feeling like, you have a voice, which we're supposed to have through the EPs. And I think this just, I personally feel like there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of communication and transparency. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's definitely some information that, is imperfect that we're operating on at times. I think it's a combination of two factors. One is the number of requests for an API that has come in that compounds that married to the idea that there is feedback around less decision participation from the community is better to avoid voter fatigue. Between the API request demand and the voter fatigue, it just seemed like a bit of a no-brainer for us. But it was clearly there's some folks who feel otherwise, and I think that's not a big issue. We can definitely rectify that in the new model by adding that buffer of kind of sentiment for everyone to jump in a call, say, hey, this is how we see it or we feel about it. And we can factor that into our decision making prior to the vote. So I think that should be captured in the new model that Meta posted in general.
I'll also add, so I totally agree, Ning, that we can definitely do a better job of communicating some of the rationale as to why we sort of make particular decisions. Maybe, I think hopefully moving forward, these calls will make it easier to sort of have these open discussions. I think one of the things that, just from my memory, going through that process during the first round of proposals was, we had 3 proposals that went out, and we were having some difficulty reaching quorum, and even for some of the easier ones. So it seemed like there was something there that we needed to rectify. And with the group that's in here and sort of the prime holders that are currently in the community right now, we're probably the most hardcore in terms of being engaged. And if it was that difficult to get that level of quorum with the most, let's say, hardcore of the community, I think that there was probably something that needed to get done regardless. But we definitely could have sort of provided a bit more feedback as to how or why we sort of made those discussions. But that's exactly why we're here and why we're sort of presenting this new model that we can at least sort of have something in the books or in some schedule that would give people the opportunity or give us the opportunity to sort of communicate with you, as well as the community, to voice any other sort of feedback on any decisions made.
We've got another hand up as well here. I don't know how to bring any. Does anyone know how to bring people on stage?
Yep,
It won't
I've
let
got
me
him.
click. It won't let me click the mic.
Hey everybody, Wow here.
Hey, wow.
Hey, wow.
No.
Hey, wow.
All right. Hey, so I just a few comments and I guess a question. I'd like to start off by saying, I thank everybody for what you guys do here. I think sometimes comments in Discord can get heated, and I take responsibility for myself sometimes here, but I think it comes from a place of love and a place of wanting to see this project succeed. We're all invested in this, both emotionally, financially, everything here. So I think that you guys kind of commented and touched on a couple of things here that I think were important. I really think this was mostly a communication issue. That when you guys, this is all kind of new, right? Like as far as these grants and proposal things, and we're kind of shooting our a shotgun from our hip here and just trying to see what works. And I think from a communication perspective, I think a lot of the concerns and questions I guess I had were kind of answered by that OX Boo. I don't know how to say your name. When you jumped into Discord and kind of gave your little couple paragraph explanation of the logic behind the question that I had, I'm like, oh, okay, well, now I get where they're coming from, right? But I think that when people see the proposal that is, like the revamp, the execution of the proposal that we all voted on, it's almost like there's two things going on here. Is like you guys had us vote on something that was kind of generic, and then all of a sudden here's something that's really fleshed out and more detailed, but we didn't get the kind of logic behind your thinking. And when you guys have meetings and things, everything's going on behind closed doors and we don't get minutes. And then all of a sudden, boom, here's this very detailed proposal. It was like everybody kind of just was trying to like assess all this information all at once, and sometimes it just shoots out verbal diarrhea and what have you when people don't have the logic behind what you guys are thinking. So again, just really think that if there was some sort of and again, you guys didn't put out the proposal, if I'm you didn't post that, right? That came from
Right. Correct.
provider, right? So I don't know the right answer as to how you guys then, okay, well, here's our logic behind the proposal, right? So again, those are, I guess, my few comments. And again, and I think this was kind of answered in Discord, and I kind of like the answer that I saw. But if you guys could just elaborate how your guys' logic on just providing a lump sum of prime versus what you believe to be the USD value of the work that's going to be provided, payable in prime upon unlock. I guess I'd like to hear a little bit about that logic. And again, thanks for all you guys do.
So some of the answer is going to be pretty, like, we have to be careful on how we address this one, right? Because I don't think we fundamentally, no one really knows what the value of prime will do, because there's like a number of dependencies around how the game performs, and just a number of other elements, what sinks do to restrict supply and so on. So I think you can't really, use a USD value effectively, because essentially you're kind of using partially correct, partial information to the best of your abilities. You have only partial information at best. So we do obviously have some information around that. We obviously can't communicate, how that's kind of determined but I know the community has their own sentiment and understanding of what they believe to be the value of things. And then on top of whatever that, assumed value, if you want to kind of go down that road, on top of that, you have, this kind of pre-trading risk associated with it. So there's like a number of elements that we kind of factor and discuss as a group to say, what do we feel makes the most sense and why? And we're working with imperfect information because the market obviously hasn't determined its set price, but there's a danger in saying, hey, we're going to give you, I'll kind of explain one danger and why you want to avoid a USD figure. Imagine that there's a USD figure associated with it, and it's determined to be paid on a specific date. And at that date, the market is in a very bad spot. A large portion of the supply is possibly owed at that point to the vendor who fulfilled the contract rather than a fixed number of tokens. So imagine the contract assumes a strike price of, I'm just going to make a number up, this is totally arbitrary, $20. And for some reason that day, terrible things happen in the market. The token's now trading at 20 cents for whatever reason, it's just, again, all made up figures. And 20% of the supply of Prime is now owed to the vendor as a result of the USD strike figure. So I think there's like some fringe cases that are kind of dangerous when you're operating with a non-transferable token grant. Does that make sense? Hello?
Yeah, I'm sorry. My phone locked and I couldn't figure out how to unmute here. Yeah, no, I mean, I get that to a certain extent. You're trying to protect the tail risk of these edge cases. I just think that the world, I don't want to say the world, but most things operate in USD terms, right? And for if their work is worth, I'm just throwing a number out there, $100,000. I don't know. I mean, their pedigree actually came across when I actually saw what they were doing pretty well. But say it's $100,000, right? I don't, understand why that. I get your edge cases, right? But that just seems so out there to me.
So-
I don't necessarily know that the dates that they got to get paid need to be public to us, right? Like, and why would we pay them in one lump sum versus some sort of milestone type thing, or if it's a 4-month contract, quarter, every month? I don't know.
I don't think there's any debate around the deliverable. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I don't think there's
good.
any. Yeah. I don't think there's any debate around, breaking up the grant into deliverable tranches so that it's like risk managed. I think that's fine. But I think that there's like, I can't, like, this is the weird part. Like when you look at how, a market maker approaches the value of a token, there's a number of values presented over a period of time. And that can be wide ranging, and that can impact how you understand what the token does, and that is assumed in and of itself, those values. And they're quite widely ranging. So I think using a USD value can be really tough. And so I don't think I have the perfect information again to set a USD figure on it. So it's difficult. And again, there's some stuff that we really probably can't discuss about it while we're working through some of these things. But I think what we tried to do is in the interest of getting the API out there to the best of our abilities as a collective, make a decision what we felt would be in the best interest of the token and the game and the community, to supply this necessary component of technology with a professional group that can execute on it really well with a reasonable amount of tokens, as a compensation mechanism, understanding the risk of the value being higher or lower of some arbitrary target. Does that make sense? I guess I'm trying to answer, but I'm being super vague.
I totally understand the moment in time that we're sitting in right now is unique in the sense that the token's not transferable, and there's all these game theory things that come into play. I would be interested to see a year from now when a grant comes up. Are you guys going to?
No. Yeah, now we're on the same page here. That part, then at that point, you can definitely operate on a dollar. As soon as the token has, the public has an understanding of the token's price, pending that the community votes to unlock it, and there's an understanding of depth of volume, there's absolutely no rationale for operating on grant systems that are not tied to US dollars.
Okay.
I think too, I would just add one kind of side note to this as well, is in thinking about denominating in Prime or USD, and this has kind of been mentioned in the chat as well. is that it really does make a strong statement from a narrative perspective that there is a stand-up company like Defined that's willing to accept a token pre-transferability, pre-market. And so, whether or not there is, obviously there's risk on both ends, like underpaying, overpaying, just this idea of someone accepting the token based on the fact that they believe in the ecosystem is, I think it's a really strong signal towards like the strength of this project, and also a signal for other companies or potential game partners or other things like that that might want to join the ecosystem in the future. And additionally, I think that, in coming up with this number, right, it is just sort of to a lot of people, and it is just kind of a random number, right? Why 25K prime? But in thinking about the amount of value that this API will provide and the level of quality, you really just come back to this pie chart meme, right? Like we look at the amount of tokens that Echelon has, and a certain percentage of that is essentially set aside for projects of this nature, and then you just look at, okay, well, what percentage of that are we willing to devote to something like this? And in this case, it ends up being about 0.2% of the Echelon treasury, and it's like, okay, 0.2%, right? Like 1/500th of the total tokens, and like, okay, maybe there's some scenario and it ends up being that Defined this was a really good deal for them or whatever, but I think everybody still kind of wins in that case because
That's a great thing that can happen though in some capacity. Like if that occurs, right? If it occurs that Defined for some reason, it makes out like really handsomely, isn't that like a really strong positive signal for other developers in some capacity to want to work on Parallels, or not Parallel, excuse me, Echelon, to further, obtain tokens themselves and participate in the economy? I think like, to me, that seems logical, like that's a positive signal if that occurs in some capacity, which is like counterintuitive. But I think it's less and less likely to occur as we move past transferability as a result of having a price associated with Prime to its counterparty token, so like be it ETH or something else. But I think just generally, yeah, like how do we're at the foundation level too, where like the pieces that we build now need to be solid, because everything's going to be backboned on them, and so we need really good quality deliverables that come out that everyone can tie into and utilize to build off of. And if we don't have that, I think we're going to pay the price later if we try to work with lesser partners.
Yeah, there's another effect of this as well, and it's the quantity of 25,000 Prime. We've been seeing conversations in Discord and around the community of people now being much more interested in trying to find ways to apply for grants within the Echelon ecosystem. So this initial sum for this grant is acting as an inspirational tool to sort of further motivate the community to find ways to expand this ecosystem that we all participate in. So even if we had this grant happen at, let's say, 15K or 20K, I would rather have our first grant proposal be a little on the higher side to act as that motivational instigator. And on top of that, we also want to make sure that Defined or in a hypothetical situation, whichever company it is, that they're excited about the amount that they're receiving in lieu of the development time that they're paying for, the server costs that they're paying for, the 2 years of development they've done to be able to provide this service as well. We want to make sure that everyone involved in this grant is excited about what's being added to the ecosystem and the take that they are receiving from it as well.
Well, thanks, guys. You guys really answered my question, and my grant proposal will be incoming in the next few days. And that's all I got. Drive fast, take chances.
Thanks, Wow.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah, just to reiterate though on what Wow was saying, I think like just to be clear, it is a very point in time circumstance, and I think we are obviously very eager and interested to just move on a number of the infrastructure pieces we want to achieve. But when there is a US dollar kind of equivalent value that we can use to determine against the cost of the services provided, I think that makes everything a lot easier. But even then, it doesn't hurt. I think it doesn't change the fact that the process should update, as Nain was saying, to ensure that there is still a community checkpoint in between the proposal and the EP vote to ratify that proposal to proceed. So I think like the process still holds up, which is a good sign, right? And so I think although it'll become cleaner as we go, the process will also remain in place irrespective of that, so that there is still community engagement, regardless of having a tighter figure to operate with when issuing grants. And also we're learning still, so right, like that's part of, we're trying our best to move, but also as much as possible, listen.
Got to be careful with the "we're learning" meme. Isn't that what Zagabond did?
No, I mean, like we are though, right? Like it's like,
yeah, 100%. No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding. Yeah, like
it's all uncharted territory. So I guess the objective is not, don't stop moving just because it's uncharted territory. Keep pushing forward, but at the same time, listen. Maybe it's like move and listen at the same time is the objective, not learn and listen. I don't know what Zagabond is really. What is that?
Well, he was the guy. He was the Azuki guy, and like,
Oh yeah,
all those
yes,
rugs,
yes.
and then he was like, "Oh, I'm
I'm learning.
so
I'm
much."
learning. Yeah. No, that's not the case here.
Yeah.
It's more just one desire to move forward and get some of this tooling into the community's hands to build on top of.
100%. Yeah, and I think some of this has been sort of more of a general conversation on the process, and like some of it has been about the specific proposal. I think, going forward, essentially with this new process that we've defined, no pun intended, we're going to start having a lot more of these calls. I think it's something as well that, when I was originally running for EP, I'd said like, oh, I want to have like host a dinner club or something like that. And, as opposed to breakfast club, where we could sort of have more of these chats anyway. And I think at first, like all of us are still hashtag learning, but now we're sort of further along the process where, we're closer to Prime being out and all these things. And so I think I think we're kind of entering an era now where we will be starting to have more of these open forums. And so in this case today, we're talking about one proposal, but I think depending on the volume and stuff, we might have these where there's multiple that are kind of batched together for these conversations. But yeah, we really do just want to start opening it up more and hearing from everybody. So if there are other like thoughts on the general flow or more specifically on this proposal, questions about this specific proposal, feel free.
Or even if there's something outside of this, right, that you want to talk about, that you want to give feedback on, please feel free to do so, right? It doesn't have to be isolated to this.
Yeah, we do have some comments in text here. I can read them out. Some of them are more comments, some of them are questions. I think maybe before we go into, I guess, some of the detailed questions here, Cordy is sort of saying, is there like a short pitch or a summary of the API that someone can give just for the less technical? I think that's what he's asking for.
I do see Razor in here. I don't know if Razor wants to come up. Yeah, he just raised his hand.
Hey, Razor.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we can hear you. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess as far as like the API goes, like what it would do is just pretty much everything right now that you would expect to get important data out of. We already have support for all of the NFT sales events and transfers and everything like that, as you can see on define.fi right now. So that's going to be like the first main thing that we concentrate on, as well as adding all the card effects, any off-chain data like descriptions and things like that as well, like parallels and which prime sets they're in, anything like that. In the future, we're going to be like in the next few months, we'll roll out support for like the Echelon contracts, so you'll be able to find out through the API what your yield is, like what's staked, pretty much anything to do with kind of like the Echelon side of things. And then we've been talking with, well, you guys, about implementing the off-chain data from the in-game API and taking out the data that you want to be able to provide to the community and merging that with all of the on-chain data as well. So it'd be stuff like game statistics, usage stats. You have like the different, like, oh man, why can't I remember the name? But anyways, it's like all of the different implementations that you're building out for all of the different things that happen within the game, like having all of that data within the API as well. So yeah, it's the lineage and bonding systems as well. So just right now we're concentrating on everything that you've kind of announced and are figuring out, and then that's kind of what was involved in our proposal. And then in the future, if you release any more features that is a big lift for us, we could probably go back and kind of discuss that at that time and see if it's more than like a week's of work or something like that to implement it into the API. Then we could have some sort of new proposal, or we could work something out with the team, or we might just do it because it's been such a success for our side of things as well. But that's kind of what we have in mind right now. Obviously, it's a really like fluid situation going forward, but for right now, we're just looking to get as much data into the API as possible and make it easy for everybody to build on top of parallel data.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think, like, just to contextualize for folks here, maybe who are less technical, like imagine having when we've been talking about this as EPs, imagine having a dashboard where you can see if the play to earn emissions pool is at 88.5% or if it's at 50%. You can see the velocity of Prime. You can see the month-over-month growth of users or players who've earned Prime. You can see the circulating supply. You can see the average daily emissions. You can see, the Echelon Prime Treasury month-over-month gain or loss. You can see the parallel Prime Treasury month-over-month loss or gain. And so I think like what it does is it services not just parallel, it services Echelon, and it services the community's needs ultimately. And it can become really, a big backbone of a lot of what, the data that flows out of the game client, as well as the Echelon ecosystem as well. So I just wanted to give you some stuff that you thought, I can see us all wanting to be able to look at in a really simple way. And the work that Razor's team would do would allow us to achieve that in a much more efficient manner. So.
Yeah, something I can't wait for this API is to be able to see what cards are loaned out, the win rate for those cards, the demand for those cards, so I'll know what to be able to go and replicate and to be able to provide to the card sharing system and to be able to view the whole supply and demand for all of the assets within this ecosystem versus what's meta within the game. There's just so much interesting data there, but the work to aggregate and present this information so it's easy to work with is not a trivial task. And I'm extraordinarily grateful that we have a implementation partner such as Defined to be able to help us out with this challenge.
Yeah, and that's like one of the things that you can't really do with just having like an on-chain like API as like with a different off-chain API. If you are able to merge both of them, you end up getting all of the events that are happening. So you get to have all the sales statistics merged with how many, like the bonding and like the lending and everything like that on the on-chain side of things. So you're able to say like, hey, this is being lent out 100 times but there's no sales for it. So like what's going on there? So you can kind of dig into the specifics of the marketplace as opposed to just trying to combine two different APIs and have a whole bunch of data from different sources. So it makes it like all centralized in one place. And we do concentrate on making all of this data as easy to access as possible. We're like an API first company. So the define.fi is really just a way for us to validate all that data, because as we all know, no one really follows any standards in crypto. So we have to be able to have something that a whole bunch of users can go to and tell us if something is wrong. And that's kind of like the big difference between us and a lot of the other API providers, that we have a way to prove that our data is correct, as opposed to just having an API and say, trust us, it's right.
Thanks for coming up to explain that, Razor. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
There's a question here from Warwick. Who's going to maintain the API, Echelon or Defined? Are there recurring payments for upkeep maintenance costs in the future to Defined?
I don't think we've defined upkeep at all at the moment. I'm not sure, but maybe I believe Define's going to be maintaining the API, right? That's their core service in business. Am I wrong, Razor?
Yeah, no, we will definitely maintain it and make sure it's up as much as it possibly can be, and have like SLAs around it and all that other stuff. Like in the future, if you come out with a giant feature that we want to implement, then we can talk about it then, about like what it would cost or like what it would take to implement that. But as we stand right now, everything that you've built and everything that you've thought of, we're planning on implementing that into the API. But aside from that, like you don't have to worry about maintaining anything. It's going to be all on our end.
Yeah, that's great.
And
thank you.
On this thread as well, just in the unimaginable situation where Defined were to be unable to continue supporting the API, it's not like the source data would be destroyed. All of the on-chain data about all of the NFT transactions within the Echelon ecosystem would still exist on the blockchain, and all of the in-game data would still exist within the Parallel Game Service API as well. The only thing that would go in that case is the bundling and aggregation and easy to access nature of the API that Defined is providing. So even in the worst case situation, it's not like the data is lost.
Yeah, I'd say it's not unforeseeable that, just like thinking about it from both the Parallel and Echelon side, it's not unforeseeable that there could be future engagements. But I think the good news is that it's encompassing of everything that's been contemplated to date. So that is the lion's share of what we intend on building for at minimum for the base game. So I think that's a good indicator as well.
And just to ease some like nerves on the us disappearing side of things, we are venture backed, and like we're a real company based in Canada. Like we have 16 employees. Like we have. It's not like we're just some anonymous shit posters on Twitter who are making this product. We have 12 senior engineers on the team. Like we have like a really big company for what you see on kind of like the front end side of things. We've spent the last 18 months focusing on the infrastructure, which is a very, very difficult thing to build. I'm not sure how many of you have tried to build blockchain indexers before, but it's probably one of the hardest things any of us has ever done. Trying to keep up with all of the events that come in across 44 different networks is not very fun, especially since how many are just pretty much garbage transactions, and we still have to process them. But yeah, like we're in this for the long haul, where the product we've built is scalable, like pretty much infinitely. It's all based on top of AWS with like using microservices and things like that. So it's definitely a really good infrastructure, and we do honestly believe that we're one of the few, if not the only ones that can build something like this right now, based off of kind of like what's out in the market. And this is kind of what we want to use as our business model, as a sense of that we want to be able to replace the infrastructure of a lot of these crypto projects that are coming out and building their own indexers. And like, honestly, like the work that we're going to be doing on the Parallel API side of things is probably a little bit cheaper than in the long run than what we would be doing for like anybody else. But with that said, we're really like hyped about the project. I own a lot of cards. I have a Prime key. I'm legitimately wearing my Prime sweater right now because I just got out of bed and that was what was available. And yeah, so like we're not going anywhere. Yeah, exactly.
What a flex! What a flex! Just like that.
Yeah.
But
no,
yeah,
and from a DD side, I mean, both myself and Fall have connected with yourself and your team, so I think we feel comfortable that this was the right decision.
Yeah, I absolutely do.
Okay. Is there anything else, Razor, you want to add, or maybe we should go to anyone else who's got questions?
Um, I I'm happy answering any more questions, but I think I've shield defined enough.
There is a question from Zero here in regards to the unimaginable worst case situation that things do go offline. The community services that will be built on top of the API that you will be providing, those would be the things that would be the greatest cost if defined were to go offline for any reason. So is there some sort of way that this would work out that the API could be maintained or also deployable by Echelon in the case where you were having to turn it offline for whatever reason?
I'm sure we could like if in the worst case scenario we could probably work something out, but like our infrastructure costs are very prohibitive.
Yeah.
Like we like in order to index this many transactions, and like I understand that you probably only want it on Ethereum and don't, not worry about the other 40 plus networks that we support. But it's like we do spend like over 30K a month on AWS costs, and so it's one of those things that like it would be up to you to figure out if we wanted to go down that path. But it is a very big infrastructure, and we're not like gonna just shut it down if something happened like immediately. We would talk to you and see what we could do to make sure that it like carries on, and like maybe we could do something where it's like a very thinned down version of our existing infrastructure, and get the community to kind of like pay for that upkeep in a sense where like we're not around anymore. But like I said, that's definitely not the plan. We have a good amount of runway, and we're venture backed by some like really big VCs in the space, and they don't want to see us fail because of the fact that they've already put so much money into it, and we've built something that is like needed in the space as well.
Yeah, I think to add some context here, like a good example is open source maintenance, like contracts that groups like ChainSafe Systems do. So oftentimes, if we ever found that Razor's team called and said, hey, we found out after, whatever, 2 years or a year or whatever, whatever duration of time that, it is quite caught, we do need to remain profitable. Like it goes kind of both ways. It's not like, hey, Defined, give us your code base and we're going to run it. I don't think that's the way to approach it. I think if you look at the vast majority of blockchains and any open source maintenance, typically what happens is the foundations issue maintenance grants. Ethereum Foundation does this, Polkadot does this, Cosmos does this, all the great protocols do this. So it's not unfathomable that occurs in the future, just to be clear. And that is how a lot of the large networks operate. So as Echelon continues to accrue prime from sinks, it may have an agreement in the future where any of the fundamental architecture components that service other programs, like APIs as an example, could have future grants to allow them to operate in a healthy way. That's not off the table, and it shouldn't be taken off the table because that's the model that succeeded in open source and specifically with blockchain maintenance. And the other thing here is that I think it's important that Echelon doesn't own it as a result of the fact that we have outside contributors building to the network, further decentralizing the contribution to the network rather than it just being Echelon. I think that is like a overlooked benefit to having a group like Defined also build on top. So yeah, hopefully that adds some context.
I have a question, a general question. Maybe I'm sure everyone is also wondering, can we get some alpha leaks? Is there anything upcoming that you want to sort of tease us on?
Razor or me?
Parallel. Sorry, Razor.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we're locking in for closed alpha. That's going to have a date publicized to the community shortly. There's some really wild stuff that's shipping this month that will, both be related to Prime and cards. That will be a big one. There's so much stuff we still have to ship between now and the end of the year and I think a lot of it's like face melting, in terms of implications. I think, it really focuses around utility for Prime, which kind of puts both my Echelon and Parallel hat on. You'll see some of that stuff roll out. Not some of it, big pieces of net new experiences and tooling roll out prior to the end of the year. And a date that we're locking for closed alpha. I think those are the big pieces. It's just been, and from just like as an update, if people want to know how it's going, I mean, the game development program manager as well as the game team are feeling super confident on our delivery timeline. The build looks incredible. There are by any conventional standard, they look like super polished graphics, but even those are getting ripped out between alpha and beta to enhance some of those things. So you guys have seen some of those card effects. I think there's like 25 different animated card effects. So when something's pacified versus when something is, upgraded versus when something's damaged, as well as a number of playfield impacts as a result of what the state of the game is. So things are really, really, healthy, and it's exciting. We're definitely getting to the point where, we're going to know exactly when pretty shortly. Not we know, but we're going to be communicating shortly, when that closed alpha comes out, what that, and what the implications of that are. And from a Prime standpoint, the kind of key thing there is that, I believe, Fall, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but we're going to be running the closed alpha likely with a 1% Prime emission functioning. So we can test all the contracts and architecture with very low risk. So instead of running 100% of emissions, we'd run 1 in, let's say, closed alpha, and then 5 or 10 or something in closed beta, and then 100% in full open. And lastly, we obviously have PD6, which we're on track for, I'm sure I'll let the comms team state that. I don't think we're going to do that in December. I think it just pushes too close into the holidays. We don't want to be that group. But that's almost finished, which is the completion of the base set, which is very exciting. And then we have the vote coming up, right? We have a transferability vote. Those are just so many major milestones between now and January that my life is just completely off the rails. So I'm excited, but it's all good and it's all positive, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I would also add to that as well that before that transferability vote goes live, we owe you guys one more sort of like closing paper from us over at Echelon, kind of clarifying all those loose ends in terms of syncs and all that good stuff that there are still questions about. So you guys can expect that before any vote to unlock, and hopefully coming up pretty quick. We'll let you guys know when that's ready for everybody, but just one more thing to add onto the stack there.
Paul, anything from you on the laundry list of stuff I said?
I'm just amazed that you managed to leak such a small amount of alpha while keeping excitement so high without even mentioning, those couple things that we're launching in the pretty short term. I'm just amazed.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the stuff that we've been working on finally is going to come to market, which is pretty stoked. I'm pretty stoked about. And I think Cold Plunge's comment is also totally valid. I completely didn't even remember to mention that. I think that's going to be interesting because it starts to frame value accrual to the protocol a bit as to how dollars coming into a game in part are value accrual to the protocol itself. So I think that's going to be interesting for everyone to have a conversation around and kind of think about how that, benefits in like a non-zero sum way, benefits both the protocol and also ensures the sustainability and profitability of Parallel as a game. But yeah, like I'm really proud of what the team has done, and I'm super excited. I think the closed alpha is going to be great, and I'm feeling eager to see that. And then I know that the closed beta is going to, the stuff that I'm seeing that they're doing while we're polishing up the production build in closed alpha state. I know that anyone who's fortunate enough to be in closed alpha and then through to closed beta is going to see some huge enhancements on top of that even further. And it makes the gray box build for anyone who's been involved in that process with us for the last little while, balancing the game and playing the game. It makes it look like child's play. Like we're talking about crayons to, a laser. Like I don't know what's super high fidelity. I guess crayons to Photoshop. Like is the delta here.
That's great. Pretty exciting times. I think we can wind it down unless there's someone else that has anything they want to come up and ask. Otherwise, I think thanks everyone for sort of joining on a Saturday afternoon here to sort of help us work through work through this process. And sort of share your thoughts. I think, I think this was a great call, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these in the future with everyone.
Yeah, I'll just say, in terms of next steps from us, I think we're going to get this vote up and running again on Monday for the EPs to vote on. Because anytime there's a proposal, right, it's either going to be EP vote with the Echelon NFTs or a prime vote. So yeah, that'll happen on Monday. We'll get that up, and then so we'll know the results of that soon. And then just kind of related to that, now that this process is sort of a little bit more established, when proposals come in, depending on the volume, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, like we might have more calls like this where we're just discussing one proposal or potentially batching a few together. Prior to the calls, we will communicate whether it's going to be a prime vote or an EP vote. But with that said, anybody can come up and sort of express their thoughts. Like if, let's say for some reason we'd said, okay, we think this is an EP vote, but there's, some really strong arguments from the community of why it should be a prime vote. It's not necessarily completely set in stone. And additionally, if something is an EP vote, at the end of the day, the EPs still have to vote on those proposals. So if you feel strongly one way or another about something, and you share your piece, maybe some of the EPs could be persuaded to vote for or against something. And so it's not like just because something is an EP vote doesn't always mean that it's going to be 11 for 11 voting in favor. And I think, especially in the long run, we will start to see some more contentious ones. And so, we want to continue to have these kind of platforms for everybody to share their opinions and just kind of help us to flesh out all these ideas and keep this ship running smoothly.
Yeah, and just my closing comments, I guess, if I can, are, I'm not above ever apologizing to the community if we maybe kind of moved a little too quick. I think you probably want us to move, but apologies to anyone who was irked by this process. I think it was really just in the interest of moving and getting development going, and we're grateful to Razor and team to work with us on this. So thank you to that. Thank you to Razor, and thanks for coming up today to answer some questions. And if you have any other feedback as things kind of move forward and you find that you need to give us feedback on something that we're operating in a way that could be better, or, just generally you want to be more involved in something, please feel free to pipe up and tell us so that we can adjust course. And our goal will remain unchanged to kind of service and ensure the success and health of the ecosystem and community involvement in that ecosystem. So thanks, and anyone who has any concerns or questions is always welcome to reach out. Are we good?
Yeah, I think we're good. Cool. Thanks everybody.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Things on the internet.